everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm teacher Aina and today we shall continue on Unit 6 Sport. For your information, this is going to be the third lesson which will be on page 65 of your student's book. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to talk about past events, and the language focus today will focus on how to use they was, they were, was, and were. Today, let me communicate with you first the framework. First, we shall get to know the rules of they was and they were in affirmative and negative forms. Next, we shall complete sentences with affirmative and negative form of they was and they were. Last but not least, we shall go through the rules of was and were and do some practices. Without further ado, let us move on to the first activity of our lesson today, which is to get to know the rules they was and they were. What do they was and they were mean? Generally, they was and they were bermaksud terdapat in affirmative ways. The only difference between they was and they were is that they was used for singular object. For example, there was an exciting match. The article "an" used here indicate that "an" means one, and there is no S at the back of the word match. The object here is match. As we can see, there is only one match. Therefore, we use they was on this case. They were is used for plural. For example, there were many medals. How do we know the object is plural? We can see that there is S at the back of the object. The object here is medal, and the medal is in plural form. Therefore, we use they were for plural objects. On the other hand, there wasn't and they weren't mean. In other words, we use it in negative sentences. The only thing that made there wasn't and they weren't different is that there wasn't is used for singular. For example, there wasn't any golf game in Olympic 2012. The object here is golf game. As you can see here, there is no S at the back of the word game. So, we can deduce that it is in a singular form. Therefore, we should use there wasn't with any. For there weren't, it is used for plural. For example, there weren't any medals. Can you see the S at the back of the medals? Therefore, we have to write there weren't any medals. If we want to use there wasn't and there weren't in negative ways, we will always use any. But not all the sentences use there wasn't and there weren't with any. It depends on the sentence. I will teach you about it after this. Let's move on to the second activity of our lesson today, which is to complete affirmative and negative sentences with they was and they were. Take a look at this text. It was adapted from your student's book, page 65, and it's about the first marathon. You have to use they was, they were, they wasn't, and they weren't to complete the gap text. 2,500 years ago, a war between Greece and Persia and a lot of battles. A big battle in a place called Marathon, which the Greeks won. This was important news, but any internet and no telephones. So a man called Pupils ran to Athens with news of the battle. He ran about 41 kilometers. Any good routes, so it was a difficult journey. When he arrived in Athens, he died. Number 1, there was. The word a war indicate there is only one war. When there is only one, the object is in singular form. When it is in singular form, There are only choices between they was and they wasn't. Since there is no keyword any used here, therefore, automatically the answer here is they was. Number 2. They were. The object here is a lot of battles. As you can see, there is S at the back of the word battles. Therefore, the object is in plural form. When the object in plural form, there are only choices between they were and they weren't. And we don't see the word any in the sentence. Therefore, we can assume that the answer here is they were. Number 3. They was. The object here is big battle. And how many big battle is there? It's only one because the article a is used. So automatically the answer is they was, as we don't see the word any in the sentences. Number 4. They wasn't. The object is internet, and how many internet is that? We don't see any s at the back. Therefore, we can assume that it's in singular form. Then the word any is used. So we can conclude that the answer is they wasn't. Number 5. They weren't. Telephones are in plural form because it has s at the back of the object and the word any is used. Therefore, we have to use they weren't as the answer. Number 6. They weren't. The object here is good roads and there is s at the back of the object. So, automatically, it is in plural. Since there is the word any, so we can conclude they weren't as the answer. However, not all they wasn't and they weren't use any. You can also use many, a lot of, and. Now, let's take a look at the example. There weren't many rich footballers 100 years ago. Nowadays, you can see many rich footballers. For example, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, Neymar. However, if we compare to 100 years ago, there weren't many rich footballers 100 years ago. The objects are in plural form because they got s at the back. Next, there weren't a lot of spectators during Olympic in 1900. We also can use a lot of together with they weren't. When something in a number more than 1, automatically we have to put s at the back of the object. The object here is spectator. Therefore, we use they weren't. Next, there wasn't a match between Zijia and Victor last night. We can also use article a together with they wasn't to show that there is only one match, but it did not happen between Zijia and Victor last night. Next, there wasn't an Olympic flag until 1920. There wasn't also used with article an. Why we use article an? A and an means the same. Article an used with object that start with vowels A, E, I, O, U. Just remember that. Since Olympic starts with vowels O, therefore we used an as the article. There is only one flag because there is no s at the back of the flag. Therefore, we used they wasn't. So now, let us move to the last activity of our lesson today, which is to learn and practice was and were. Basically, was and were means the same as is, am, or are. The only difference is that was and were used for past tense. Meanwhile, is, am, are used for present tense. Just bear in mind that was in the past tense for is and am, and were is the past tense for are. They are affirmative and negative. For affirmative, we used was and were, and for negative, we used wasn't and weren't. When to use was, were, wasn't, weren't. We use was, wasn't with the subject pronoun he, she, it, I. Meanwhile, were and weren't only used when we need pronoun they, we, you. Let's try to practice with some examples. Number 1. Hiroshi Hokatsu, blank space, a competitor. What is the answer? Hiroshi Hokatsu was a competitor. Next, table tennis in the Olympics until 1988. Table tennis wasn't in the Olympics until 1988. Golf and rugby, the events for the first time in Olympic 2016. Golf and rugby were the events for the first time in Olympic 2016. Last one, women competitors in Olympic 1900. Women weren't competitors in Olympic 1900. Okay, GOODJOB, good job, good job, good job. So that's the end of our lesson today. This is the homework that I have prepared for you. Feel free to complete it. You can go to the video description below and click on the link to do the exercise straight away. As usual, don't forget to visit my channel and give it a like if possible. Subscribe my YouTube channel and press the bell so that you will always get notified whenever I update new videos. With that, I would like to thank you for watching and I shall see you at the next video. Bye!